Well, right off the bat, I have to admit that this movie didn't look very good. And from what I've seen, most people seem to agree. But I love Steve Carell, and it looked unique and different. And I feel like unique movies deserve a chance to prove themselves. But what's it about and did it deliver? Well, it's about this guy who's dealing with some recent trauma. He's basically suffering from PTSD. But the way he figured out to deal with that trauma is pretty interesting. He's got these dolls or miniature figures that he plays with and takes photos of. And he's using them to tell stories and sort of as therapy for himself. And significant portions of the movie plays out as these animated sequences with these dolls. So the setup and the approach is actually pretty unique. And it's made by Robert Zemeckis, from Back to the Future and Forrest Gump. So it's gonna be well made from a technical standpoint too. And the animation is actually pretty impressive. And seamlessly integrated too. I would also have to assume they used motion capture for the faces, because the dolls look a lot like the actors. And the main character is just a sweet guy who's been through a lot, and has essentially suffered and still suffers for no reason at all. The supporting cast is also very good. They're basically all women. And they're very sympathetic and supporting people. Likeable characters. And the story itself is somewhat compelling. You want this guy to overcome his issues. So on paper there's a fair amount to like about this. But I really struggle to like it as much as I wanted to. Because there's something about it that just doesn't work. It feels like it doesn't really know what kind of movie it wants to be. Mainly because the tone is all over the place, to be honest. It deals with some really dark and serious issues, but then there's a lot of sweet and lighthearted stuff too. But then there's also these strange sexual undertones. And some pretty violent stuff too. So it's this odd mix of different stuff, and some of them kinda clash with each other. They don't work so well together. And at times I'm kinda wondering how this even got a PG-13 approval. I guess because of the fact that it never gets explicitly raunchy or violent. It just sorta hints at it, and the more mature moments are kinda implied, but heavily implied. And I guess also because a lot of the violence is done through the dolls. But yeah, I didn't hate it, but it's kinda bizarre. Tonally at least. I liked a lot of things about it. I liked the creative approach and the performances. But as a whole I don't think it really ended up working all that well. And they also kinda hit you over the head with some of the stuff that could have been a lot more subtle. Like I'm sure most people would have got it without outright explaining it. And I wonder if the filmmakers even knew what they wanted to do with it. Or if they just sorta winged it and it turned out to be a little bit of a mess. Again, mostly from the perspective of the tone. Because the story does work. It's coherent and surprisingly easy to follow. Even with the animated parts that sorta run parallel to the main story. That could have made things very confusing and convoluted, but it didn't. So they handled that part very well. But I don't know, it just didn't really work for me. And would I recommend it? Not really. It's just not that good. Unless you really like Steve Carell, then maybe. So probably skip this one. Or don't. I'm not your dad. But I am trying to sell out, so consider liking, subbing, hitting that bell and supporting me on Patreon. Because I really need to get myself some more fancy shoes. And hey, why not drop a comment below or check out another review? I'd appreciate it. Thanks.